Welcome to The Release Show. I'm your host, Brittany Sconyers. On today's show, we have Funmi Alagbe. Funmi is the founder of Parenting Grace, a firm that aims to equip parents with the knowledge and tools for effective parenting. She is a certified positive discipline parent educator with over 15 years of experience working with children and teens in Nigeria and Canada. One of her primary goals is to help parents overcome reluctance about sex talks in order to shape the sexual character of their children and reduce related misfortunes. Let's welcome Funmi.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you for having me on your show today. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you, and thank you for being on the show. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Besides being a coach for parents and children, you're also a data processing and project management professional with 10 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. Why did you choose this path, and how does it influence your passion for coaching?
Well, I would say I didn't quite start up to pursue a career in that path. Series of events led me into doing data processing. I have always loved calculations, particularly mathematics. My father is a mathematician and is also a physicist, and he taught in colleges as a lecturer. So personally, I've always had affinity for calculations and for numbers. So when it was time for me to choose a career, when I was going to the university, my father wanted me to do medicine because the most popular profession in those days were doctors, lawyers, engineers, and all that. But my mom was leaning towards me doing pharmacy because she understood that I didn't quite like the sight of blood. And quite honestly, I don't like the sight of blood. So medicine was not my thing. But then when I was applying the university, I applied for medicine and pharmacy as first and second choices. But as it turned out, I didn't get admission into any of those two, rather to study applied geophysics. And as at that time, that field was new to me. It was new to my parents. We didn't quite understand or know what it entails. But then they didn't want me to lose that admission. So it was agreed that I go to the university to study that course for the first year with the hope of switching over the second year. So within that year, I started researching about the profession and I asked questions. I have an uncle then in the university with me that also told me more about geophysics, and I started falling in love with it. And so I was not prepared to change anymore, but I needed to convince my father. But fortunately for me, a friend of his visited and asked what course I was studying in the university, and I told him geophysics. He happened to be more knowledgeable about it, and he was so excited about it. He was so fascinated. He was said all sorts of good things about the profession, how lucrative it is, and things like that. And my dad got convinced to let me study geophysics. So 4 or 5 years down the line, I graduated with a degree in applied geophysics. And I was fortunate enough to have an employment right after graduation in a multinational oil and gas industry. So that job gave me a lot of experience and international exposure. And I learned valuable skills there, what you will call soft skills, people skills, interpersonal skills, communication, presentation skills. So these skills, I've been able to transfer them into my coaching program with children and with parents now.
That is so interesting. I love it.
Thank you.
Can you tell us more about yourself and what it's like growing up in Nigeria where sex education is rarely taught? How did that shape your adulthood?
Okay, like I said, I grew up in Nigeria. I am the first of 5 children from my mom. Sex education was seen as a taboo topic, like in many other cultures then. Nobody spoke to me about sex, and I didn't speak to anybody about it. So I would say I had zero sex education. So when puberty kicked in, my body was changing. I was looking for relevant information about what was happening to me. Nobody was talking to me. I was so curious to know. And my mom, being a nurse and an expert in family planning, had a lot of books, textbooks on family planning. So when nobody is there, I'll take those textbooks and flip through pages, looking for quite getting what I needed from anyone. Even when I started my period, I was too ashamed to tell my mom about it. I only spoke to my house help then, who was a few years older than me, and she spoke to my mom. She talked to my mom about it. Then my mom was excited for me, but I was really, really ashamed. And then it was then I got what you would call the sex talk. And it went like this. You have to be careful now. If you touch a man, you will be pregnant. And the messages were full of warnings and threats of pregnancies. And we were so naive in those days. And I believe 100% what my mom told me. And what that message did for me was that it's created some sort of fear and anxiety in me. I was being careful around boys, particularly in school, in the classroom, on the playground. I don't want to move close to any boy. I'm afraid I'll get pregnant and things like that. But along the line, I got to know that you don't just get pregnant by a boy touching you. So, and then I overcome the fear and the anxiety. And then growing up in my neighborhood, I saw girls whose future were truncated because they got mixed up sexually. I remember a young lady that lost her life due to abortion. Those were unforgettable experiences. As at that time, I became a follower of Christ and I started developing a passion for me was a protective factor. So by my university days, I had developed passion for working with girls and teenagers. So each time I come home on holiday, I will gather girls few blocks around my neighborhood together with my siblings to talk to them in my own little way. That I would say was the beginning of an experience that informed what I do today. So I have been working with children and teenagers in various faith-based organizations in Nigeria and Canada as a mentor and counselor. And this experience informed my work with parents now.
That's great. I don't recall my mom having the sex talk with me either. And I remember being at a party and we were at a family party and I felt something like come out of me and I was like, this doesn't seem normal. So I ran to their restroom and it was blood and I was afraid. I didn't know. I was in that restroom for probably like an hour and everybody was like, where's Brittany? And then all of a sudden people were like knocking on the door, but I was so ashamed and embarrassed because I didn't know what I needed to do. I knew I didn't have any sanitary napkins with me or anything like that, or I was afraid to even ask for them, but she never had that talk with me, and so I was afraid. And I know how kids are when they come on their cycles, young girls, that they're afraid because they don't know what to do, and we need to educate them and help them. I think it's very important that we educate our kids on puberty because it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point. Some girls come on their cycles earlier than others. I think I was around 13 years old when I started mine. But yeah, I do recall and I remember that experience and how afraid I was when it happened. I didn't know what to do. And then after that, I would get to school and I would be afraid to sit in seats because I was afraid that it would mess my clothing up or, because I had seen it happen to other girls. And I remember telling a girl at school, hey, I think you need to go to the restroom because, and so I know how that felt, it was just very embarrassing and not to have the education. I just felt like, who was there to help me? And my mom really didn't talk to me about a lot of stuff. So a lot of things that I really needed to know. And I think this next generation of parents, we need to be more informative with our kids and let them know and not be afraid to have these conversations, because at some point they're going to experience them. Like my husband and I, we have 2 girls and 1 on the way. And so we have 3 girls that we have to deal with this situation. So I think it's very important, especially we have a 12-year-old that she'll be 13 in August. So you just never know when that time is going to come for her to start her cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
this is a very important conversation.
Yes. And I think parents are so afraid of it. And I don't understand why. I don't know what put the fear in the parent of having those conversations with their children about sex and puberty, because it's better to come from you than from the internet and their friends, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
Exactly. And then I think you build a foundation with your kids where they're more open with you about their lives by having a conversation like this, because this conversation can be a little sensitive, a little uncomfortable. So once you've made it past that stage, you know, they may open up to you about anything, you know?
Absolutely. You just nailed it.
Thank you. As a professional in this topic, why do you think parents find it difficult to educate their children about sex and possible changes during puberty?
Actually, one of the reasons is what I mentioned earlier. There's this culture of taboo around sexuality, anything related to that. And this stems from the belief that it will raise curiosity in children to experiment with sex if you talk to them about sex. However, research has proven to us that, in fact, reverse is the case. If you withhold sexuality information from your children, the curiosity in them will drive them to other sources of information, other external sources of information that you do not have control over. In the olden days, 30 years ago, we might have gotten away with that. But in this day and age, with technological advancement, we cannot get away with that. We cannot afford to not talk to our kids about sex, because then they will get external information, misinformation, wrong messages from different sources that's not going to be helpful to them. So one of the reasons is because we think there's this taboo around sexuality. And the second reason I would say is because it feels awkward and it feels embarrassing. Yeah, so, and I quite get it. It will feel uncomfortable for us as parents when we are talking about these topics or when we are thinking of talking to our children about it. But we will not allow discomfort to keep us from talking. Because when we do not talk to our kids about it, lack of information and access of information is, in fact, it teaches children that we parents are not interested in talking to them about sexuality. And secondly, it also tells them that probably we are not a good source of sexuality information because we keep quiet about it. So there are some implicit messages that we pass across when we avoid talking about these topics. So children will get a message that, oh, my parents are not comfortable. They are not interested in this topic. So I shouldn't bring it up with them. And then they will think you're not a good source of sexuality information.
But
if we as parents, despite our discomfort, go ahead and start this conversation with our children, we are communicating to them that we care so deeply about them that we are willing to endure this embarrassment and discomfort for their own sake. And that communicates love to them. It's a sacrifice we have to do. Another reason, the third reason I will give, which is the most common one, is, hey, your 5-year-old comes to you and asks you, Mommy, where do babies come from? We'll be taken aback because we don't even know how to answer that question. We don't know where to strike a balance, not to give too much information or too little information. Cook up stories that will say, oh, the stork brought the baby in the bassinet and things like that, or the baby came from heaven and things like that. So we come up with all sorts of stories which are not accurate stories, information I mean. So there are age-appropriate way to answer children's questions. So when we give those misinformation, we misguide, setting a foundation that's not going to be helpful at the long run. So those are the reasons why I think parents are not talking to their children, because they do not know what to say, but there are age-appropriate information that we can give to children that we will strike a balance between giving too much information and giving too little information.
And I've actually experienced that myself with my 6-year-old. She did ask me about where the babies come from. And it is it is uncomfortable. You know, I did kind of go around the question. But what age should you start like having those conversations?
Yeah, there's some people that believe it should be around 5. Some people say 3. So I will always say between 3 and 5 years. You just need to know what to say at different stages of development. We need to keep that in mind. So a child that is 3 years old, when they're asking you questions, or 5 years old, asking you where babies come from, they are not really interested in sexual aspect of things. They're not thinking the way adults think. They're only curious. It's just curiosity. So you just need to answer their very simple statements, and that will satisfy their curiosity. So, but when they ask that question, our adult mind thinks that, oh, they are interested in the sexual aspect of life. Not quite. They're just curious to know. So simple information, they will be fine with it. And then we are setting a foundation of accurate information, open communication, which is going to be helpful in the long run.
Yeah, so when she asked me, I was like, oh, well, the baby's in my tummy, and then it comes out of we call it private part. And so I did tell her that, you know, but when she started asking all these other questions, I don't know. I'm going to have to get some advice from you to help me through this.
Right.
The common type of sex education. It is normal. It really is. I mean, I hear from my friends all the time, you know, people like, how do you have conversations like this with your kids? Some people just avoid having it. And then they go out in the world and learn it on their own, you know. And I mean, just like, you know, my parents, you know, they avoided having that conversation with me, and I had to figure things out on my own, you know. But I also think maybe they should teach this in schools. Don't you think that?
Actually, some schools do sex education. They teach children, which is good. But there is everybody. We are all stakeholders in this. We can't outsource this conversation to schools or to what they see on the internet or what they read. We as parents occupy a very key position in their life, and we have great influence. So we should use our own. I always advocate for parents-driven sex education. Talk to your kids about it. The first time they are being, let it be that when they're being taught in school, they're saying, oh, I already know that. My parents spoke to me about it. So then they can come back and tell you what they hear in school, and you can always correct things if need be. So, but we as parents need to occupy that position in their life. We cannot outsource it. Because if we outsource it, one, we don't have a chance to slot in our own values in any way if you have one. So schools will do their own best, but some schools don't do. Some schools will do, but we can't just leave children to chances. You have to take the bull by the horn and also educate your own children.
No, I totally agree with that. I think it's more important coming from a parent anyways versus coming from, someone else. I think they'll value the information so much more coming from somebody that they're super close to, educating them on it.
Absolutely.
The common type of sex education most girls get is that if you touch a man, you'll get pregnant. While some may argue that this statement informs children about everything she needs to know, do you think there's more that's left out?
First of all, the statement, if you touch a man, you'll be pregnant, is nothing close to sex education, in my opinion. In fact, it is misinformation. And I wonder where this statement originated from. In the literal sense of it, it is not only inaccurate, it is vague. And secondly, it is one-sided because it is only directed to girls. I am yet to hear both statements. Rather, what you often hear is that boys will always be boys. And that's setting a double standard. We're telling our girls something else, and we're telling our boys something else. We all make up the society, both sexes. So that is setting a double standard. So there are a lot of information that's been left unsaid. In my own opinion, a complete sex education that is parents-driven should include giving biological facts about sex, puberty, and all that's relating to that in an age-appropriate way. And more importantly, it should include the sharing of values that will help these children to develop a healthy sexual character. And what do I mean by healthy sexual character? I mean, it's about teaching our children to make the right sexual decisions when nobody is watching. And why is this important? Because in our society today, sexual character flaws have brought down many prominent and high-profile men in our society. Think of the Me Too movement. This week on the news, I heard that a particular school in Canada, some girls from that school are staging a protest against sexual harassment in schools. These are societal issues, and it is not isolated to a particular country or continent. It is an issue that is everywhere. The COVID-19 lockdown has even proven to us that there are a lot of sexual vices going on around the world, with increase in rape cases, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and things like that. These are societal issues that is not isolated to a particular place. So, and we as parents occupy a key role in helping to shape how our children view things outside them. We can try, we can do our own best. So shaping of sexual character, in my opinion, it's about teaching our boys to be responsible, to treat girls and ladies with dignity and respect. It's about teaching children that will grow up to be adults, that will be faithful to their spouses. This is how we can build a lasting relationship and a better society, in my own opinion.
Great advice. What inspired you to help parents overcome reluctance about sex talks with their children? What made you feel this is a must-have conversation?
Thank you for that question. Like I mentioned, I started working with children and teenagers in various faith-based organizations as a counselor and a mentor. In addition to that, I also volunteer with a non-governmental organization called School of Virtue in Nigeria, where we have a program towards girls, teenagers, and the like. So we have a camp that we host them for the space of the weekend, and we do a lot of counseling. We have over 1,000 girls gather. We do counseling for them on areas of sexuality. So I have seen and I've heard the havoc misguided sexual activities could wreak in the lives of young people, from sexual abuse by uncles, cousins, teachers, religious leaders, to rape, to pornography addiction, prostitution, and name it. So in all of these experiences, something stuck to me, that young people lack accurate sexuality information to keep them safe. One of the cases that I happened to counsel was a girl who was being sexually abused by her cousin right under her roof. And this abuse continued for a space of 3 good years. Each time this guy comes around, he comes with a knife and threatens to kill her if she ever dares to talk to anybody about it. She was too petrified to even mention it to anybody. And this she endured for 3 good years. Along the line, she got pregnant, she aborted, her life was messed up. But it got to a point she could no longer take this. And then she summoned the courage to tell her father what has been happening. And that was a mistake she made on her part because, in her own opinion, because the father didn't even know how to handle that. If there was any love he had for this girl, that was quickly replaced with hatred. And she regretted ever opening up to talk to her father about it. So cases like this stood with me for years. And it only propelled me to ask some questions personally. The question I ask myself is, what do I do with these experiences? What do I do with these experiences? Quite emotional, quite uncomfortable things you will hear. And it's dawned on me that we need to educate parents. Parents need to be empowered to be able to guide their children, to be able to safeguard them, to give them the right conversation that will keep them safe. So that's why I started talking with parents. And then also, when I had the opportunity to attend the Institute for National Transformation in Nigeria, where I did an executive leadership program, my project was on sex education, how to safeguard children against sexual abuse. So I have been researching this topic for close to 10 years, and my goal is to educate parents on how to do a better job of parenting and how to protect the vulnerable people within their care.
So do you think that if you have the conversations with your kid early enough, that'll prevent them from child abuse or sexual abuse?
Absolutely. The goal is to start early. You need to have that conversation early enough because you're building a relationship with your children. You're having open conversation. So the earlier, the better. So you start early and you talk often about this matter. And also, as they grow up, you will have conversation. They will have trainings around sexual abuse prevention where they can learn skills like assertiveness. They can learn how refusal skills and things like that. So these will always protect them against sexual abuse.
I had a friend who went through a similar situation where she was sexually abused by her uncle, and it went on for many years, and she didn't say anything to her parents till she was an adult, older adult. And when she went to her father to let him know, he was upset. He didn't believe her. And so I don't understand why when kids come to their parents about these situations and finally get the strength to even open up and tell them that they don't believe them. And that's very hurtful. It's already, they've gone through a traumatizing situation. And then you're not even there to support them when they do get the nerve to even let you know. So what do you think causes the parent to react like that?
And I think our parents in the first place don't know how to handle such. They might have an inclination that things like that happen, but if it happens within their household or to somebody close to them, like their child, people don't know how to go about that. First of all, because of the taboo around it, some of them are tempted to want to bury this and not address it. I belong to some other organizations that have attend to victims of rape and all that, where we try to get justice for them. It's also dependent on the environment where you're in. There might be a lot more support in certain parts of the world than other parts of the world. In other parts of the world, even the police or the community will be the one to say, oh, you need to keep it quiet. You need to just shut your mouth about it. You don't want everybody to know about it. Just bury it. And a lot of things, these victims don't get the right support they need. And it's the society, the ministries of women and all that should be the one joining hands together to make sure that there is justice for victims. But it's still an ongoing conversation, and we'll always continue to get better at it. But so parents in the first place don't know how to handle it, and the environment surrounding them, the community, the way what will people say if they hear this thing happen? So let's settle it outside of the police station, things like that. So those are the things you'll hear from where I come from. So, but in other parts of the world, there are numbers you could call and all that to report that they will come, professionals that will come and help the child. So I think we all need to do the right thing, depending on where we live. We need to know the right people to contact and what to say to protect these children and to help the victims.
Educating ourselves is very important. I remember, growing up, I had slumber parties over friends' houses and things like that. But now, as a parent, you don't even want your kid going over anyone's house because of all the child abuse and cases that you hear. It's like even the people that you think you can trust, you really can't trust. So especially with young girls, it's like, and I understand why we are so sensitive with young girls versus males, because they get sexually abused as well. But having young girls, like, you don't want them to be around somebody's father because you don't know. You don't know. So it could be your best friend. You have no clue if this person would ever touch your child in a wrong way. So, this generation now, we don't have slumber parties like that. You're constantly thinking about what could happen if you allow your child to stay over someone else's house. But then back in the day, I stayed over someone's house and no one cared. It didn't happen to me, but it's like, you just never know. It's just, yeah, it's so different now.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
As an expert, what advice do you have for parents that may be ready to give the talk to their children?
Well, first of all, I would say it is not about the talk. It's about ongoing conversation with our children. So gone are those days where we'll just sit down our children and sit them down and give them a lecture for 30 minutes or 1 hour and we're done with sex education. No. In this day and age, with the amount of information children are exposed to, we need to do ongoing conversation. So I would say to parents, start early and talk often. Start early when children are still happy with simple information. Talk often using everyday events, using what we call teachable moments. You in your sitting room, listening to the news, there's a case or something pop up in the news that is related to sexuality. Those are teachable moments you can use to strike a conversation with your children. And it doesn't have to be long. And then maybe an aunt is getting married, somebody is having a baby. Those are teachable moments. So that will help us to have conversation on an ongoing basis. Having regulation present itself, and then or as children come to you to ask you questions. So you use those moments to strike conversations with your children. And also, I want to say parents should use the right name for genitals. That's one area that many parents find it difficult to do. You know what? Think about it. We have our part of the body. We have our hands, we have noses, we have eyes, we have mouth. We call them by their correct names. But when it comes to private parts, we use pseudonyms for them because we're not quite comfortable. And doing that, we are passing the message across to the children that there's something secretive about this. There's something we shouldn't talk about this. Don't even mention it. That's the message we're sending across. So, and research has told us that the first step in overcoming this shame and discomfort is to use the correct names. When you're telling a child, a 5-year-old, that this is your hand, this is your penis, it's okay. Use the right name. Vulva is vulva. So that's one area we parents also need to do. And it's not going to be comfortable all at once. You need to do it continuously, right? You need to practice. And the more you practice, the more you say it, the more comfortable it will become. But first of all, that's one step, because it will also protect these children in case there is any sexual abuse or anything. They can report, they can mention the right part of their body that somebody touched or anything or whatsoever. So it is advisable to do that. And also, I want to say parents should be open and honest when it comes to conversation around sex. As parents whose children are already growing up, they didn't start quite early when they were 5. So you can tell children like, oh, you know what? My parents didn't talk to me about sex when I was growing up. So, and I find it very uncomfortable to talk about it, or I don't even know how to talk about it. But I attended a webinar, or I listened to a program, I read a book, and I realized that this is an important conversation to have. So going forward, I will start to have this conversation with you because it is necessary to keep you protected and safe. If we come from that angle where we are open, we are honest with our children, they're more likely to open, and we'll get better as we keep doing it. And the last one, I would say that we need to improve our knowledge about this. Because if our children come to us and ask us questions and we don't know how to, so we will never get started. So our confidence to talk with them will improve, will increase if we are comfortable and we are confident in our own knowledge. So we need to first of all answer our own questions around sexuality before we attempt to answer our children's questions. Get that knowledge out there, read that book, get that course, and sign up for it and learn and know how to answer questions around sexuality.
Simply by speaking with you, I can see you're quite enthusiastic and passionate for sex education. If you were to publish a book on this topic, what would it cover?
Good question. I think it will cover most of the things I've mentioned. I will talk about what guiding principles should guide us when we are talking to our children about sex and sexuality. It will include things like why parents are reluctant to talk about sex and how to overcome that reluctance about sex. It will cover other aspects of sexuality, sexual abuse prevention, and how to keep children protected. And it will cover topics like sexting and things like that. And most importantly, it will have age-appropriate responses to the most common questions that children ask. So age-appropriate responses so that parents can know what to say so that they don't give too much information or too little information. Yeah.
Can you tell us about your firm, Parenting Grace, and what's it about? What is its mission and how do you intend to accomplish it?
Oh, okay. So Parenting Grace was formally registered in Canada in 2019. Our mission is to equip parents with knowledge and tools for effective parenting and to inspire children to maximize their potential. And one of our goals is to help parents overcome the reluctance about sex talks. And we do this by organizing trainings, workshops, webinars. And recently we developed an online course to help parents with how to talk in an age-appropriate way. So the link to that course is in our bio on Parenting Grace on Instagram. If anybody is interested, it will give you age-appropriate responses to the most common questions that your children will ask you and how to guide them in having this conversation. So in addition to helping parents with sexual-related conversations, we also help with day-to-day parenting challenges using positive discipline principles that will help to raise and nurture self-reliant children that will grow up to be adults who are happy, successful, and contributing members of the society. So that's what we do.
I love that. So can anyone in the world be a part of your program, or is it just Canada-based?
Or anyone in the world can be a part of the program. About a month ago, we had a webinar and we had over 450 people register for that webinar, with about 300 people actually participated in it. And that was when we launched our online course. So that link to the course is on the bio in Instagram for Parenting Grace. So anybody can be part of it. In the future, we'll be organizing webinars as well, and we will always publicize it. So try to follow us on Instagram, because you can keep abreast of all our activities and things that we'll be doing in the future.
That is great. So guys, her Instagram is Parenting Grace. So follow her on Instagram, and that way you can be a part of the conversation with her. Lastly, what are some points that you feel parents must address when giving their child sex education in order to fully convey all that is necessary?
Yeah, first of all, you need to let your children know that you're ready to have conversations. Tell your children that they can always come to you whenever they have any questions around sexuality. The goal is to establish yourself as the go-to expert, because you're the one that can protect your children the most. So establish yourself is open to have that conversation. You need to let your children know that you're open and they can always come to you with any questions. And let them know also that if they are in any trouble, if they have ever been touched or something happened to them, they can come to you and report. They will not be in trouble. Because most times children don't want to tell their parent what is happening because they are afraid they will be in trouble. You will suddenly hate them. Tell them that no matter what happens to them, you're guaranteeing them your 100% love and affection. That is not going to change anything. It's never their fault. So you need to give those children that understanding. Then with that, they have the confidence to come to you anytime they have questions. So my children come to me every now and then from school. Oh, I heard this on the news. On the playground, somebody said this. What does this mean? That's where you want to be. So, and I always tell parents, how do you know that you're doing a good job? If your child is able to come to you and ask you questions freely, then you're on the right path, because there's a lot of gain to that. You're striking a good relationship from the onset. And this is going to be helpful when children grow up to become adults, to become teenagers, when they're having all sorts of different challenges. If your children are able to talk to you about sex, then they're able to open up to you about any topic. So there's a lot of win in this. So start that conversation as soon as you can.
So in your program, do you have like a how-to age group? Like how do you talk to certain age groups about this topic? Because I know what I would tell a 6-year-old, I wouldn't tell a 12-year-old. Or I mean, I wouldn't tell a 12-year-old what I tell a 12-year-old, I wouldn't tell a 6-year-old. You know what I mean? So do you have like a program that goes through the different ages of how you should speak about this topic?
Yeah, like I said, the online course was designed for different age group. So you have conversations and things, how to answer questions for children age 3 and 5. So if your child asks you the same question at that age, what you will give them is just a basic information. But it's more. It's just like you're adding an extra layer of information to be more clear. So we have age-appropriate questions and responses that you can give to your children when they ask this question. So, and as they grow up old, like you said, there will be more layers, more detail will be added to what you will give them. So the way the course is structured, it's going to give age-appropriate responses.
Well, thank you so much, Funmi, for being on the Release Show and educating us on the steps that we need to take to tell our children about sex behaviors. Is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I would just like to say thank you so much for having me on this show. It's an opportunity, and I really appreciate that, to come to people's way and to give them this information. It is an important conversation that we need to start to have with our children. A lot of things are happening. Children are bombarded with different kind of information from different sources. So they want to hear from us. Research says that children are eager to hear from their parents. So let's take the bull by the horn and start to have this conversation with our children. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Parenting Grace. I will see you there.
That is so great. Well, thank you guys for tuning into the Release Show. See you next time.